morning, everyone. It is Monday, May 18th. It's good to be with you this morning. Over the course of this week ahead, we are going to be preparing for an online congregational forum this next Sunday, May 24th. It's going to take place at 11:15 a.m. after our morning worship service. In this forum, we're going to be discussing the next steps forward for us as a congregation as the COVID-19 pandemic looks like it is going to stretch on for a number of months still following. And we have a lot of conversation to begin to have to listen to one another and to discern how the Spirit of God is guiding us forward. In order to prepare for this forum, we're going to be using the Ignatian prayer practice of the Daily Examen. Now, normally, this prayer practice would have 5 steps that you would all do at once, but we're going to break up this prayer over the course of the week. And we are going to use step 1 on Monday and step 2 on Tuesday and following all the way through step 5 on Friday. I pray that these steps that we walk through as we pray together in this form will be helpful not only for our communal discernment, but that it'll also be helpful for your prayer life, and that these moments of reflection and prayer will guide you into the presence of the Spirit of God at this time, and that you may find heart in these moments, that God is with you, and that this process may actually lead you forward a little bit from this present moment that you may be in to take some next steps forward for yourself in what is to come. For all of us together as a congregation, the next important questions for us are not the questions that have technical answers, the what is going to happen or the how is something going to happen, but the crucial questions for us that I spoke of in my sermon this morning or yesterday morning was around the question of who. Who is walking with us to help provide guidance? Yes, God is walking with us through the Spirit, but who else is walking with us in these days that we can trust and rely upon to help make decisions? And then also the other who question is, who is God calling us to be? In all things, it's not just about rushing to the answers that we want, but it's about listening deeply for who it is that God is forming us and calling us to be in this time. Ignatius, as he taught this prayer practice, encouraged people to talk with the Spirit or talk with Jesus as if he was a friend that was right there with you. And there are a few ways that you can do this in your prayer practice this week. You could just simply spend some time in prayerful silence and speak in your mind to God, all of the different things that may be on your heart. And that's certainly one way that you can do it. A second is that if you like to write or journal, have some scrap paper or your journal in front of you and you can write out your prayers or your thoughts to God. The third is that you can also speak these prayers together with others, not in the form of a prayer that says, let's fold our hands together and bow our heads, but conversation with your kids and with your family that's around you, and to ponder these questions and to discern them as if Jesus is right there speaking and talking with you about these things as well. And so whatever form is most meaningful for you or most connective, know that the Spirit of God is with you in that moment, in that prayer. Today is Monday, and we are going to be focusing on the first step of the Daily Examen. And so what I invite you to do today is to look back on the events of the last 2 months. Yeah, 2 months, right? It feels like the beginning of March was just yesterday, but at the same time, it feels like it has been much, much longer than just those 2 months. But let's look back over those 2 months in the company of the Holy Spirit, knowing that we don't do so alone, but the Spirit is here with us in this moment. Now, these days, they may seem confusing to you. They certainly have been confusing to me and still are in many ways. The Ignatian Center's description, I think, is perfect. They say that it may feel like a blur or a jumble or a muddle, right? I think all 3 of those describe the moments that we've been living through. But in the midst of our prayer today, we're going to ask God to bring clarity and understanding into these events that have taken place. But the trick to this prayer is this, that clarity and understanding may not come right away. The idea for the beginning point of the prayer today is to simply take a moment to breathe, to trust that the Spirit is with you, and to begin to reflect upon all of the different events that have taken place. You don't have to try and make sense of them in the moment. Just process them. Bring them into your consciousness. Not just thinking about them, but also feel them. What emotions really emerge within you as you think about those moments? And then from that point, just rest in the Spirit. Allow the Spirit's presence to come to you and to speak whatever may be spoken. It may feel like silence to you. There may not be a lot of answers as we are still praying this prayer in the midst of an ongoing crisis. Or there may be words that you receive from the Spirit. And I invite you to think about those, ponder them, maybe even write them down, and to begin to listen for how the Spirit is speaking. So let me just really quickly read off the list of the things that I have been praying about over this last week that are simply moments. I'm going to leave them neutral. I'm not going to reflect upon them, but I'm just going to share these moments that as I think back on the last 2 months, these are the moments that really come to mind. The first 2 weeks of March continue to be etched in my brain. Those first days in worship, I think it was right on the very 1st of March, that we began talking about distancing a little bit in the sanctuary during the sharing of the peace. And then on March 8th, which was our last worship together, we started talking about doing the Corona bump with one another. That feels just crazy now, 2 months later. But on March 8th, that's still where we were, not really knowing the severity of what was going to be coming in front of us. And then I remember that following Wednesday, the 11th, that was our last Wednesday night gathering with families and kids in worship. And it was in the middle of that time together, we heard that the NBA was going to be canceling their season and that Tom Hanks had come down with the coronavirus. And we all knew by the end of that night that we were going to have some uncertain and really difficult days ahead. And I think we were all just a little bit scared of what was going to be happening next. That next day on Thursday, of course, was the day that Sam last went to school. And I remember that next weekend needing to tell him that school was canceled and that he likely was not going to be going back to school again this year, and trying to brace him for the reality of what was happening. And then, of course, canceling in-person worship that Sunday and beginning to move to that point where we were all then living under stay-at-home orders here in the area. But yet there were so many great moments that came along in those first few weeks of learning all of the ways that we were going to adapt our worship life, of filming worship videos and then going live online with Zoom with you all to be able to make that in-person worship happen. And then, of course, all of the work that went into Holy Week and Easter videos and being able to proclaim the message that Christ was risen in a totally different form, in a totally different context. And I remember standing there in the parking lot overlooking St. Anthony's as I filmed that video for Easter, just with my heart breaking and aching for the care workers and the people who were sick all over the country. And knowing that even though we were proclaiming resurrection, that we still had many days of death in front of us. And it was from that point then moving forward that I remember seeing the tremendous need and hearing the stories of people that were losing their jobs and were losing income, and hearing from community ministry and others of the increased food needs that we were seeing in our communities, and recognizing that even though this was still just a few weeks into the pandemic, that we were going to be in for months, if not years, of economic struggle for our communities and for many of the neighbors in and around Harvey Park, where our congregation is located, if not for people even within our own families. But yet those moments of difficulty, they were really balanced out as we every night at 8 o'clock would go to the door with our dog Piper and with Sam, and we would howl together with all of our other neighbors. And we'd be able to smile a little bit as we recognized all of the people that were giving up their time and energy and their safety to be able to serve in hospitals, in grocery stores, and all other different types of work. And how meaningful those moments of unity and connection with our neighbors through those howls were, and how much hope that gave us. And in the midst of that time, we were also all learning these new ways of connecting with one another, especially using Zoom, of being on the computer, of realizing that even though we were not face to face, that there were many ways that we were establishing and continuing to grow in relationship with people in our congregation, with friends, with family, with people around the world, and how meaningful and important our digital communication was becoming, but yet how exhausting it was to sit hour upon hour in front of a screen with, yes, the joy of being in connection with one another, but also the lament of not having people right there with us. And then in these last weeks, I don't know about you, but I've been dealing with incredible fatigue. A measure probably of just being tired from all of the work that went in these first weeks, but also the fatigue of continuing to not know what's coming next in this next week or in this next month or throughout the rest of our year. And that is exhausting. There's been many nights where I've moved from this seat here at my desk to my couch, which you can't see right here next to me, just slump down and sit and scroll through posts on my phone or watch TV, just with a sinking feeling of dread. And I know that that's not uplifting, but it's the reality. And I know it's not just for me, as I've heard these stories from others of the unbelievable weight of what life may continue to look like and what life already has been. And then finally, we all, as we move into these next months of May, are beginning to hear that the death toll from COVID-19 is continuing to be high, and that we likely, before the end of May, will see over 100,000 people here in the United States having lost their lives to this virus. And recognizing the grief that exists within us and trying to process and make sense of these moments that have happened. And that's really it. That I can't make sense of all of this on my own. And as much as I've journaled and I've taken notes and I've taken time to pray and contemplate these things, and even I've had to preach on them and try and figure out how to say something publicly to you all, there's still a lot that I don't know, things that I can't make sense of. And it's here in this moment, in the midst of feeling from time to time overwhelmed with emotions, that I take another breath. That I trust that the Spirit of God is walking here with me, that the Spirit of God is walking with us, and that in time, the Spirit will bring clarity and understanding. That we will have a chance to know what God was up to through all of this and how it is that we are being changed. But let's not jump there yet. Let's simply take time for each of us to be able to process, to think back on what has happened, and to be able to bring those emotions and feelings and thoughts right to the forefront and to feel them fully. If you feel like you may want some resolution in your prayer today, I invite you to try and sit as much as possible in this unresolved moment, to continue to be perhaps uncomfortable. And in the midst of feeling uncomfortable or not having resolution, simply listen. Listen for what you may be hearing from others that are there with you, or perhaps what you may be hearing from God through the Spirit today. We will move on to step 2 tomorrow. May God's peace be with you.